Hi guys, welcome back to ClickPlate, the show where we decode some of the internet's most popular recipes. And today we are diving deep into the world of Asian baking, a world where bakes are a little less sweet, more subtle in flavor, and most importantly, light in texture. Today's recipe is a wibbly wobbly wonder, the Japanese cheesecake.
Light, fluffy, and slightly jiggly, the Japanese cheesecake is a sort of sponge cake and souffle combined into one. It's lighter than your traditional dense cheesecake and tastes like you're eating clouds. This fluffy variation of cheesecake made its first appearance in Japan in the 1950s during post-World War II, when Japan was starting to experiment with more Western-style type food. It wasn't until the 1990s when a bakery by the name of Uncle Tetsu opened in Fukuoka, Japan, that popularized the cake to what we know it as today. With stores located in over a dozen countries, this cheesecake is more popular than ever.
Now, the method to make this cheesecake is completely different to any other cheesecake you will make. It's basically making a meringue mix and stirring it through a whole host of other ingredients to create that lightness. So to start off, we're going to mix together some cream cheese, some milk, and some butter. Now, this is where this feels very different as cheesecakes go, because you're going to melt this over a bain-marie, over a little pot of simmering water. And once it's melted through, we're going to whisk up some egg whites and fold in the egg yolk. So really what you're looking for is to create that lightness in here. So add the milk in, give it a little mix just to allow it to kind of combine. And now the heat from this pan is going to turn this into something that's really beautiful and smooth. I have to admit that this seems like a strange way to make a cheesecake, but everywhere I've looked online, this is the way they do it. So this is going to melt down, and now we're going to create that lightness in some egg whites, which is essentially the same method as making a meringue. So I'm going to separate our eggs and then slowly whisk the egg whites with some sugar until we have something that's beautiful, light, and fluffy.
Separate 6 eggs, saving the egg whites in one bowl and saving the yolks for later. Whisk on high using a hand whisk or standalone mixer. Once the eggs have turned frothy, gradually add the sugar in a little bit at a time until completely combined before adding in cream of tartar. You should get left with a thick shaving foam-like mixture.
Now, it does take a bit of time and patience, but by adding that sugar in slowly, you should have a sort of meringue mix that if you push between your fingers, you won't feel the grains of sugar, and that means that it's completely dissolved. So at this point now, we have a beautiful meringue mix. I'm just going to tap out any of that excess that's on the whisk. This is ready to go, and while this has been whisking away, I have also been keeping an eye on my cream cheese, butter, and milk mixture, which is beautifully nice and melted at this point. So remove it from the heat and just give it a last little mix through, and you'll make sure that that cream cheese is nice and smooth and melted through. So this is looking pretty good at this point. So what we want to do is add in our egg yolks. So let's get rid of the spatula. We're going to do this with a whisk in one hand and egg yolks in the other, and you just want to keep this moving so that you get a nice even incorporation of the egg yolks, which are going to give great richness to this cheesecake. If you can imagine, you've used all the light airiness from the egg whites, but you're going to get that richness and color from the egg yolks in here. They're fully incorporated at this point, so take up that flour, take up a sieve, and we're going to keep as much air in here as possible, because remember, there's so much air in that meringue mix. We want to keep everything light and airy so we get that fluffy texture in the end. So just sift away, make it rain, or snow in this situation. And to the flour, we've got 2 tablespoons of cornflour as well, which should help stabilize the whole mix. So just sieve that in. Now I'm going to attempt to fold this through as gently as possible until I have a nice smooth mixture. Grab up a spatula, and the last little ingredient before we fold through the egg whites is a good glug of yuzu. Now, this is not a traditional ingredient in the Japanese cheesecake, but I've made this a few times, and that little hit of this gorgeous Asian citrus is really sharp and sweet and fragrant that runs through the lightness of this cheesecake. So about 1.5 tablespoons goes in here. And now we just want to fold through that flour until we have a nice, even and smooth batter. Does take a moment or two, but take your time with this until you have a nice smooth batter. And once you do, it's now time to fold through our meringue egg white mixture. The trick here is to add a very generous dollop of it first, and this will allow you to kind of mix quite vigorously without losing too much of the air. And then we're going to take the rest, fold it through super gently, put it into our cake tin that's lined with some parchment paper, create a little bit of a bain-marie, and get it in the oven to cook.
Once the mixture is mostly smooth bar a few little egg white pockets, transfer the mix to a lined baking tin with a removable base sitting in a high-sided roasting tin. How good does that look? Now, to ensure the cheesecake cooks gently and evenly, carefully pour boiling water around the sides of the tin before placing it in an oven on the lower shelf at 140 degrees Celsius, which is 280 degrees Fahrenheit. Bake for 40 to 45 minutes or until almost set. Turn the oven off and leave it in the oven for 30 minutes. Once it's at room temperature, remove the baking tin and carefully peel off that parchment paper. Just look at that wibbly wobbly wonder.
After all that hard work and that time in the oven, you can see you get this gorgeous, light and airy cheesecake. It's not going to win any awards for its beauty, but I can promise you that this will be light and airy. And you can even see if you press it down, it's got a little bit of a wobble, which is exactly what you're after. Now, you could serve it just like this. You can actually stick it in the fridge and let it set even more, but you can also serve it straight from the oven. So it's up to you. I'm going to finish it off with a tiny touch of icing, which I know is not traditional, but I like that little whisper of sweetness over the top. So little dusting of the icing. I feel it kind of makes the cracks and crannies a little bit pretty. And this is pretty much good to go. I'm going to serve up a slice and then we can get tasting. I just want to dive into that. And even as I'm kind of cutting into it, you can see how light and fluffy it is. Look at that. That is Japanese cheesecake magic. There's a wibble, there's a wobble, all the things we thought there'd be. And now it's time to try it. Now, I've got to say, I'm pretty confident about this recreation of this Japanese cheesecake, just purely on its looks. It's got the wibble, it's got the wobble, but does it taste good? So, let's dig in and try. Good texture. Wow. It's not in any way as dense as a traditional New York cheesecake. Instead, it's kind of like a cross between a cheesecake and a chiffon cake. It has that lightness, that airiness, and somewhat sweet egginess that a chiffon cake has. This is really good, and actually the nice touch here is that yuzu, that citrus bite. You could add some lemon zest in here and it would give you that same sort of effect. But I really like the texture, and I think, when I went to Asia and we did this TV series about Asian baking, one of the things I noticed the most was all about that subtle sweetness, not the rich sweetness that you get in sort of American-style buttercreams and things like that. It's much more subtle flavors and subtle sweetness and light and airy textures, and this is a really good example of just that. If you are intrigued by the idea of a Japanese cheesecake, I think this is definitely one to try. As always, I'm going to leave the recipe in the box below where you can check out all the ingredients. Guys, if you've enjoyed this recipe, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to make sure you get to know when these recipes land your way. And of course, if you have seen this recipe or you've tried this recipe before, let me know if we've done justice to the Japanese cheesecake and if it is CLICKPLATE worthy. I'm going to sign off here, tuck into the rest of the cheesecake, so I'll see you soon.